Yeah, it was about damn time that I finally remade this video. This is something that I've been wanting to do for ages. I'm just not happy at all with the old version, the original that I made almost 4 years ago now, back when I started out, very early in my YouTubing days. I'm not pleased at all with that video, I don't like it. It's just out of date. It's not accurate any longer. And I wasn't entirely honest in that video anyway. I went more by legacy rather than personal opinion. Like I took into consideration heavily which characters has the greatest legacy from that show, which characters made the largest impact. Not necessarily which were my personal favorites, not quite. So I think this video deserves a remake. No, it needs a remake. I need to get the proper list, my proper list of the top villains of Batman the Animated Series. I need to get that list out there. I'm also doing this this time around. I'm doing it without a script. That's why I sound so rambly and confused. I don't really feel anymore that doing these kinds of videos with a script is that good, because with a script, doing a narration like this or a review, whatever, with a script, you always come off as a bit fake and phony, because it kinda is. It's all been rehearsed, and even though you're stating your personal opinions, it doesn't quite come off as genuine when you have a script. It's not natural. Of course, it's different with the Arkham sessions. That's naturally different because those are audio plays. I mean, they are essentially audio plays. You're playing a character with lines of dialogue and all that. And it fits this video especially to do it without a script, because now I will definitely be genuine and honest. Anyway, let's get started with the list. Let's stop beating around the bush and just get into it. I'm doing top 10 this time. The last one was 5, only 5. But I figured if I'm gonna remake it, I might as well do 10 instead, because there were so many great villains on the show anyway. So, right. Number 10. Number 10 is the Riddler. Yep, the Riddler. Eddie Nigma naps the number 10 spot. The Riddler was not perfect on the show. He had issues, he had flaws, which is why he's only at my number 10, because as you all well know, I love the Riddler. His origin was a bit weak. It wasn't bad, but it was a bit weak. The creators of the show couldn't really figure out who they wanted their Riddler to be until the very final Riddler episode, Riddler's Reform. Ironically, they finally figured out who the Riddler were at last. But before that, he was, his motivations, his MO, it wasn't quite there. But nevertheless, despite that, I really enjoyed TAS Riddler anyway. I loved John Glover's performance. I loved the depiction, the portrayal of his personality and all that. His smugness, his arrogance. The fact that he isn't a zany Looney Tune like he was in the comics prior to the animated series and in the 60s TV show. Instead, they made him a calm, sophisticated, smooth, suave intellectual. This is essentially where the modern Riddler was born in the animated series. And I really like the look of him, the suit and the hat and all that, instead of a jumpsuit. Yeah, I really enjoyed TAS Riddler, despite the fact he had some flaws. He wasn't perfect, but still very enjoyable. Number 9 is the Penguin. The Penguin naps the number 9 spot. Just as Riddler, Pengy also had some issues, but they weren't the same type of issues. It wasn't a problem of them not knowing who their Penguin was, it was a problem of them not knowing what to do with their Penguin. For most of his episodes, Penguin was just the generic stand-in villain, Whenever they needed a stand-in generic villain, they turned to Penguin. Roles that any villain on the show could have filled, even generic gangsters like Rupert Thorne. But the general depiction of the character, the portrayal, I really like. It's, of course, it was before Penguin had been reimagined as a mob boss in the comics, so that's not the version we got. Well, we got it later in the New Batman Adventures, but that's an entirely different story. We instead got, well, the classic Penguin, the Penguin we had in the comics at the time. An eccentric, outlandish master criminal. A sophisticated gentleman master criminal. But they also combined that with aspects of Batman Returns' Penguin. The deformed freak. And I really like that. I really like taking these two aspects and combining them to create something fairly unique, but that also very much, of course, feels like the Penguin. And then, of course, there is that one episode. Sure, he was misused in most episodes, but there is that one episode where he was used perfectly. The one episode that really explored and really focused on the character. You all know which one I'm talking about. It's Birds of a Feather, which is one of the greatest episodes of the entire series, and in my opinion, the best reform episode, villain reform episode. That one did essentially what Batman Returns failed to do. It did a tragic, sympathetic take on the freaky, deformed Penguin. I just wish more episodes had done what Birds of a Feather did, of course. Because of that, I can only rank Pengy as number 9. Number 7 is The Ventriloquist and Scarface. The Ventriloquist and Scarface was, in my opinion, depicted perfectly on the show. He didn't appear that much, maybe, and he appeared fairly late in the game. But in the comics, he was a new addition. He appeared in 1988, so it's almost a... I mean, I guess we're kind of lucky they adapted him at all, because they could have just skipped him because he was so new. And in the comics, he doesn't appear a whole lot either. He's a bit rare in appearances. But when he does appear in the comics, it's usually always great. I can't really think of any outright bad ventriloquist stories. So he's done well most of the time. But even despite that, I still feel that the animated series actually improved on the character. I feel that the animated series explored his psyche a bit more, his psychological aspects of the character, which is of course the most interesting aspect. It really went into the whole abusive relationship between Scarface and Arnold, really showcased that, and how essentially, you know, Arnold hates himself and wishes that he could be a tough guy gangster, because of course, as we all know, Scarface is Arnold. Or maybe that's just my depiction, but that's what I get, especially from the animated series, even more so than the comics. And the character was a perfect fit too for this series, with its, you know, classic film noir style that the show had, and the character has that already in the comics. And it's even more apparent in the show because they just go so perfectly together. And the voice work was of course amazing. I think his name is George DeZunda, something like that, who voiced both Arnold and Scarface. I especially love his work as Scarface, of course. That is the definitive Scarface voice for me. And it's so much fun to listen to. That old school, old-timey gangster New York type accent. It's hilarious and very entertaining. And at number 7 we have Poison Ivy. Yeah, Poison Ivy. I feel that Poison Ivy is one of the more overlooked villains on TAS. Maybe that's a bit strange. I mean, Poison Ivy, she's very popular. But I feel that people don't really talk about her when they talk about the show and the villains very much. And when they do, I feel that it's mostly negative stuff. People complain and say that she was weak on the show. I especially hear that, people think her origin story, Pretty Poison, was a weak one. I don't agree. I think it's a pretty good origin story. It's not the best. It's not necessarily amazing. Maybe it's not on the level of TwoFace Part 1 and 2, of course. But it is good. It's pretty damn good. And her other episodes are good as well, especially House and Garden, which is the final Poison Ivy episode on the animated series. That one is a masterpiece. It's one of the greatest episodes on the show. The show did a really great job at adapting classic Poison Ivy. A evil, delusional woman who's obsessed with plants and feels that plants are better than humans. I mean, that's Poison Ivy, right? And they also really focused on the femme fatale side of her, the seductive femme fatale side of her, which is also very Poison Ivy. But this being the animated series, we really got a heavy film noir vibe from this character, which is great. There are different ways you can portray Ivy. You can go for a more sympathetic take. It wasn't as common at the time, it's become more common later. And I like those takes as well. I've talked about this in the past. I'm fine with either a pure evil femme fatale Ivy and a tragic, sympathetic Ivy, who kinda just wants to be left alone and be in nature. Both works. They both equally work. Of course, they went with the evil one, the evil, seductive, delusional femme fatale on this show, and it works perfectly. Diane Pershing, who voiced her, is also fantastic, and her voice work also goes very well with the film noir vibe. She sounds like a typical classic femme fatale. And number 6 is Baby Doll. Now, Baby Doll could actually have been higher on the list, I guess. But I feel that, well, she is a bit of a one-shot villain. I mean, sure, she appears in one episode of the new Batman Adventures as well. But on the animated series, the actual animated series, she only appears once. And I kind of feel that she works best that way. I don't think there was really a whole lot more you could do with her after that one episode, and therefore I don't feel comfortable putting her higher on the list, even though in a way I kind of wanted to, because I really like Baby Doll. I think she is a fascinating character. She's funny, she is tragic, she's disturbing, she's all these things at the same time. When I watch the Baby Doll episode, I feel amused, sad, and disturbed at the same time. It's just such perfect writing with that character. It's like lightning in a bottle, and that is of course why she doesn't quite work in further stories. And what would even her motivations be continuing a criminal career? No, she works fine for that one episode, and that one episode is absolutely perfect. It's an episode I never get tired of. I can watch it over and over and over, and I will never stop liking it. I can't really say the same for all of the episodes on the show. But that one episode and that one character is very special to me. Of course, there's a lot of people who don't like Baby Doll. They think she's annoying and goofy. Yeah, I mean, sure, you're entitled to your own opinion. You can think she's annoying and goofy if you want to. But me, personally, I just don't understand that at all, because I think she's absolutely fascinating. And of course, again, amazing voice work, and I can't remember who voiced her, unfortunately, but the actress did an amazing job. Number 5 is Harley Quinn. Yep, Harley Quinn was number 1 on my old video, and that is just so wrong. But like I said, I went by legacy and impact, and obviously Harley's impact on on that show was enormous. I mean, she was created on the show. And often when people talk about the show and its greatest accomplishments, they often bring up Harley Quinn as the greatest accomplishment the show made. Creating Harley Quinn. Giving the world Harley Quinn. And it seems that in most people's opinions, that's still the best version of the character. No matter how many things she's appeared in, movies, comics, shows, and games, and how popular she's become, ridiculously popular now in later years, a lot of people still seems to gravitate towards the animated series, like that is still the best version of her. And of course, I personally I agree. That is also why I put her as number one, because that is, in my opinion, without a doubt, the best version of her. And I still feel that way, of course. But she's not my personal favorite villain on the show. No, of course not. That is ridiculous. No. But she was always a joy to watch. No matter what episode it is. She's a lot of fun. She's funny. She's entertaining. But she's also tragic and sympathetic, and you feel sorry for her. The show captured that perfectly. The tragic comedy of Harley Quinn. Number 4. We're at number 4 now. And that is the Joker. Yes, we go from Harley to Joker. And Joker remains in the same spot. He was number 4 in the old video as well. He's often number 4 on my lists. I don't know why that is. I would say that the Joker on the animated series version of the Joker is my favorite take on that character, my favorite adaptation. It's the best Joker we've ever gotten outside of the comics. It is a perfect Joker. Mark Hamill, of course, is great. And he probably is the best actor to portray the character. Well, at least, you know, in animation, when it comes to voice work. Maybe even overall, including the live-action ones, maybe. But it isn't just Mark Hamill. I feel like people focus a bit too much on Mark Hamill when they praise TAS Joker. Like, yeah, he was amazing. Maybe even the best Joker performer. But we can't forget the writing. The writing is also there, and the writing is also amazing, and also plays a huge role in making TAS Joker so good. The writing for Joker on the show was great. He was the funny prankster guy, but a deadly prankster guy, the classic clown Joker. But he was also very complex, and they explored his bizarre relationship with Batman, his obsession with Batman. How there's no point in committing crimes if there's no Batman and all that. I mean, this show was the first really to do that, outside of the comics, of course. It was the first adaptation of Batman to really explore that with the Joker. I mean, 89 didn't really do any of that. And the 60s show didn't really do any of that either. And I like the look of the character. It's classic Joker. Yeah, TAS Joker is classic Joker done perfectly. Number 3. And we're getting close to the end now of the list. Number 3 is Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze was my number 2 on the old list, so he's not that far away from his original position. As I've talked about a billion times before on this channel, and as everyone else has covered a billion times before, Mr. Freeze was perfect on the show, and he was essentially born on the show. I mean, we had good Freezes before the animated series, which a lot of people forget. There was, of course, that George Sanders episode on the 60s show, which was really good, and a couple of comics. Well, I can think of one comic at least that was pretty good before the animated series. But the modern Freeze, the really great Freeze, and the one we really think of today as Freeze, was born on this show. And Mr. Freeze has never been done better than he was on this show. I think everyone basically agrees on that. No matter what they do with him, you know, no matter what he appears in, they can't quite seem to top the animated series. The comics, they just keep on failing and failing and failing. They can't even get close. Of course, there's the classic episode Heart of Ice. That is the best Freeze episode, obviously, one of the best episodes of the show. But I also really like his second episode, Deep Freeze. Yeah, I like it. Can you believe that? Most people seem to hate that one. It's not perfect, and it does feel a bit rushed. It should have been a two-parter, but overall, I really like the plot and all the things going on in the episode. And Freeze is great in it. And then, of course, Freeze got his own freaking movie, Sub-Zero, which is a movie I also like quite a lot. And it's amazing that he got his own movie. They did a lot with Freeze. This version of Freeze from the show, even though the focus is always on Heart of Ice. People always pay all the focus to Heart of Ice, and that is the best appearance of him in this universe, of course, but they did other good things with him too. He wasn't a one-shot character, like some people seem to want to make him out to be. No, he made more very good appearances. He worked perfectly on the show. What else can I say? You're never gonna beat it. No matter what you try to do with Freeze, it's never gonna be as good. And my number 2 is the Mad Hatter. Yep, the Mad Hatter has been bumped up. Or is it bumped down? No, it's bumped up, right? Quite a bit. He was my number 5 on the old list, and now he's number 2. Yeah, if I'm gonna be perfectly honest, and when I really think about it, I really like the Mad Hatter on the show. I mean, obviously, I've said that before already 100 billion times, but I mean, I really like him on the show. I really think he's great. Again, like Freeze, it's a case of the character has never been better. And no matter what he appears in and what the hell they do with him, they just can't top it. They just can't top TAS. And the comics, they just keep on failing over and over and over. I don't even know if they're trying, just like with Freeze. They're not even getting close. No matter how many comic storylines they do with the character, they just can't get it. This show did what, no one else has managed to do, and they did with the character what really should have been done with him long before that in the comics. Because he made quite a fair bit of appearances long before this show aired, yet nothing was really done with him. As I've said before, I actually prefer the Imposter Hatter in the comics, because the Wonderland themed one was just misused. Yeah, the Mad Hatter on the show is just such a wonderfully whimsical character, and he's perfectly performed by Roddy McDowall, and the design is great. It's my favorite Jervis Tetch design, I'd say, and they did many wonderful things with him. Mad as a Hatter is of course the best one, the best episode. Perchance to Dream is a fantastic episode too. I mean, I probably like that one better. But that was not really about him, it's about Bruce Wayne. And then we have the last episode on the animated series, The Worrymen, which always gets overlooked. It's not an amazing episode, but it's still a good one. Even that one, is good. It may not be the most original episode, but it features the Mad Hatter, and he's just always so much fun to watch. And I like the fact that he just moved on, He moved on from his obsession with Alice and with Batman from the 2 previous episodes, and just, started focusing on himself instead. It's called character development. So yeah, I'm sure you, JJ, will be very happy to find out that, to see that I'm placing Jervis on number 2. If I'm going to be perfectly honest with myself and with you, he is my second favorite villain on the show. It almost surprises myself, but yeah, it's the only conclusion I can come with. He has to be placed on the number 2 spot. And now, finally, for number 1, and you all know who it is. It is... can I think of something funny to trick you with instead? Like, it's Sid the Squid. Yeah, it's Sid the Squid. He's my favorite TAS Batman villain. No, it's of course that guy, what's his name, TwoFace something? Yeah, it's TwoFace. I placed him on number 3 on the old list. Can you believe that? Number 3. That is so silly. I mean, of course he's my personal favorite. Like, come on. Who else would it be? I mean, TwoFace is my favorite character, as you all know, and this version from the show is my favorite version of that character. Well, favorite adaptation of him. So obviously, it needs to be number 1, and it is number 1. It's just ludicrous of me to not put him as number 1. Yeah, I guess I can't say a whole lot because I've spent so much time in the past talking about this version of TwoFace already. They always have problems. Often anyway. Very often have problems in adapting TwoFace for other media. They always seem to mess up Batman Forever, The Dark Knight, Gotham, where he just disappeared. And he was written out of many movies that he was supposed to appear in. They just, cut him. And, oh, of course, God, how could I forget? The Arkham games. Perhaps the biggest crime of them all. They had a pretty great Two-Face there, but they just neglected him. Yeah, they always seem to have a problem with Harvey for some darn reason. But this show, the very first adaptation, not counting 89... the very first adaptation got it perfectly. That is kind of weird, but maybe that's why they don't even bother. We got it right the first time around, why even bother? It's been done perfectly. And that is true. In a sense, it's true. How do you beat TAS? You know, how do you beat it? It's gonna be very hard. Very hard. I think you can reach the same level, probably. But I don't know if you can really beat it. I think that's near impossible. Yeah, as I'm just repeating myself. The show explores his split personality perfectly, his duality, his twisted sense of justice, the tragic aspect of the character, his friendship with Bruce Wayne, which of course was really a new invention of the show, because in the comics it was usually he was an ally of Batman, not really a friend of Bruce Wayne. That was a very fascinating new aspect. His tragic romance with Grace, which is also a great part of the character that's often ignored. Even in some of the greatest comics, like Eye of the Beholder, like Gilda is barely a character in that story. The voice work is great. Richard Mole is probably still the best Two-Face actor, probably. And the design is fantastic. It invented the black and white suit, which has become iconic. I guess I'm a bit sick of it now, because it's been used so much. But at the time, when this show came out, it was genius. And so obvious. Like, why did they not think of that sooner? Black and white, light and darkness, good and evil, like, duh. I keep saying this, like, in almost every entry. But I gotta say it again, Two-Face was done perfectly on this show. And yeah, there you have it. That is my list. My new list. My updated list. I think it ended up being a bit more rambly than I hoped. I'm sure a lot of you clicked away long ago and aren't still listening. That's a shame. That's a shame, but what are you gonna do? I didn't feel like writing a script. It would have felt so disingenuine. I've definitely begun to change the ways I'm doing videos. I just don't like doing the videos the old way anymore. It's not fun. It's not fun, you know. I don't enjoy it, making the videos the old way. that I used to do. The last one I did that way was, of course, you know, the Brainiac video. As some runner-ups, I want to do some runner-ups. Clayface. I really wanted to put him on the list as well, but a top 10 can only have 10. So yeah, he had to be excluded. But he was great on the show, maybe the best version of Clayface, because in the comics he's such a darn mess. But this show combined different aspects of the character and did it really well. A lot of people's favorite Clayface, and maybe mine too. And Scarecrow. Scarecrow is, of course, as you know, one of my very, very, very favorite villains. But on the show, he was only good. He wasn't great, he was only good. The show didn't really do a whole lot with him. Nothing really fascinating. It didn't explore him as a character. It used him as a clever foil for Batman. And his fear toxin was used pretty effectively. So it did that very well, or pretty well at least, but yeah, as a character he wasn't explored. So I just, even though I wanted to and I love Scarecrow, I just couldn't really put him on the list. He didn't quite deserve it, in my opinion, but I guess I make him my number 12, and Clayface my number 11. And I also want to mention Ra's al Ghul. And I do call him Ra's al Ghul in this case, no Ras here, because they call him Ra's on the show. He was done, again, he was done perfectly, like I keep saying in this damn video. But it was done perfectly. It was a perfect adaptation of the classic, pre-crisis, essentially. The classic Ra's, the Denny O'Neil Ra's, but it was actually better. I think this show did Ra's better, the Denny O'Neil Ra's better than Denny O'Neil himself. Yeah, I don't think you can get a better classic Ra's. But of course, I'm not the biggest Ra's fan to begin with. I like the character, but he's not one of my very favorite Batman villains, as you all know. So I didn't feel like putting him on the list. Oh, and Clock King. Of course, I gotta mention Clock King. I forgot about him, because he's not a Batman villain. But he was on the show regardless, and he was great. Yeah, the best adaptation of Clock King, I'd say. Maybe even better than the comics, the Green Arrow comics, the old Green Arrow comics. I'm not really very familiar with the modern Clock King. And there you have it. Those are my top 10 favorite Batman the Animated Series villains. And this time I did the list properly. And this list effectively replaces the old one. So you can disregard that one. It's not official anymore. It's not official anymore. This is my official. These are my real favorites. How I would truly rank them. Yeah, I just felt I had to do this finally at last. I've been wanting to do it for so long. And yeah, here it is. Write down your favorites in the comments, although I think we've done that already. We've talked so much about the animated series on this channel, because it is my favorite adaptation of Batman. So obviously I've talked about it a lot, so you know, we've gone through it. But you know, nevertheless, there's new people have come to the channel since I talked about the show last. And yeah, write down your favorites, top 10, top 20, whatever you want. Write them down in the comments, and write down what you think of my list, and what you thought of this rambly, aimless video where I had no script and just kept on rambling. I have no idea how long this video is gonna be, like an hour? I better just stop right now.